The House on Spine Hill Road. Chapter 1. The House with No Welcome. Everyone in Briar Hollow knew about the house on Spine Hill Road, but no one spoke of it aloud. It sat at the end of a long, curling lane, shrouded in crooked trees that never shed their leaves. Trees that looked dead but still swayed in the wind like they were whispering secrets. Some said they had been planted upside down, their roots buried in the sky. The house looked ordinary from a distance. 2 stories, pale green siding, ivy crawling up a crumbling stone chimney. Its windows reflected just enough sunlight to seem lived in, but closer inspection always told another story. The ivy wasn't just crawling, it was gripping. The windows were not just shut, they were sealed, as though the house itself didn't want anything to come in or leave. Children whispered that the front gate locked itself the moment anyone stepped through. Others claimed the doorknob turned when no one touched it, or that a light flickered upstairs at 3:13 a.m. every single night, even though no one lived there. When a new family moved into town and asked about the home, the townspeople only shook their heads. Their faces would tighten like someone had mentioned a dead relative. "That house doesn't take kindly to strangers," said old Mrs. Teller, the town's oldest librarian and self-appointed historian. Her voice creaked like the pages of her books. It didn't like the Hollisters, or the Faulkners, or the Deans. People said the Hollisters left after only 6 days, just vanished. The Faulkners were found sleepwalking in the woods, barefoot in the frost. The Deans simply stopped speaking. No one stayed in the house more than a month. Most didn't even last a week. One sharp fall evening, as wind scraped dry leaves across the road and the moon swelled behind the trees like a swollen eye, 14-year-old Nora and her mother, Cynthia, stepped out of a battered moving van. They had no choice. The Spine Hill house was all they could afford after the fire that claimed everything but 2 suitcases. Nora noticed it first. The silence. The way the wind stopped as soon as her sneaker crunched the gravel of the front walk, how the chirping crickets went dead silent. The air felt heavier, like walking underwater. Then the front gate swung open by itself. The rusted hinges didn't squeal. They groaned, like a throat clearing. Nora looked at her mom, but Cynthia was too busy checking her phone's GPS. As they stepped up to the door, it creaked open before they touched it. Not wide, just enough to say, "Come in, if you dare." Inside, the house was cold and dark. The light switches didn't work. The air smelled like wet wood, mildew, and something faintly metallic, like blood on old coins. But what unsettled Nora most was the staircase. Not just that it creaked, but how it creaked. The first step groaned, the third sighed, but the second? Each room was worse than the last. The living room had old wallpaper that peeled in long strips, exposing words scratched into the plaster beneath. Names, dates, and phrases like "it watches" and "don't blink." The kitchen had a refrigerator with the light inside still on, though the power had been shut off for years. The basement door was nailed shut, each nail driven in at a slant. That night they had no furniture, just sleeping bags and a lantern. Nora lay in the living room beside her mom, who was already snoring softly, worn from weeks of stress. The silence was thick. Then came the whisper. "Nora." She sat up straight. Her heart pounded, but the sound hadn't come from a dream. It hadn't come from outside. It came from behind the fireplace. She crept toward it, her breath fogged in the cold air. The closer she got, the louder the whispering became, but not clearer, just more urgent. She pressed her hand to the bricks. They were warm. She backed away slowly, eyes fixed on the fireplace. The whispering stopped the moment she moved. The next morning, Cynthia found Nora already dressed, eyes wide. "Did you sleep at all?" Nora shook her head. She didn't mention the whisper or the warmth or how, in the middle of the night, she swore she saw the ivy outside move like fingers against the window. The house didn't sleep that night, and neither did she. Chapter 2. The room that stayed locked. They discovered it on the second day. Nora had been exploring the upstairs hallway, her flashlight flickering with every step. Dust hung in the air like fog, thick and glittering in the shaft of late-morning sunlight coming from the one uncovered window. There were 4 doors on the upper floor. 3 opened easily. The 4th one didn't budge. The doorknob was brass, cold to the touch, with ornate carvings of twisting vines. No matter how hard she turned it, the lock wouldn't give. Nora pushed, kicked, even tried using a bobby pin. Nothing worked. When she called her mother to try, the door opened an inch, then slammed shut by itself. They laughed it off at first, nervously. That night, Nora couldn't stop staring at the crack beneath the locked door. Every now and then she swore she saw a light flicker from inside, faint and golden, like candlelight. By the 3rd night, things escalated. Nora heard the sound of pacing behind the door, soft footsteps, deliberate, and then the scratching. Not loud, not frantic, but steady, like nails tracing shapes. She pressed her ear to the wood and heard something breathing. The next morning she found a single word carved into the floor just outside the room. Stay. Her mother said maybe it had always been there. But Nora knew better. When she passed by later that day, the doorknob was warm, and from inside something whispered almost. Chapter 3. Whispers Beneath the Floorboards. The whispers began on a quiet Thursday afternoon. Nora was in the hallway downstairs, tracing the edges of an old picture frame with her finger, when she heard it. A soft hush, like breath passing through wooden slats. She froze. At first, she thought it was the wind under the house. But the sound came again. Words, not just air, muffled, unintelligible, but rhythmic, like someone repeating a sentence again and again beneath the floorboards. She knelt and pressed her ear to the wood. Silence. But just as she began to pull away, she heard it, clear this time. Nora. She jerked back, heart pounding. When she told her mother gave her a tired look. "Old houses make strange noises," she said. That night, the whispers returned, louder, more urgent. Nora grabbed a flashlight and prized open the floor vent near the fireplace. A gust of cold, dusty air met her face. She could see only darkness inside, stretching into the crawl space beneath the house. She reached in. Her fingers brushed something soft. She pulled it out. A child's shoe. Old, cracked leather, no dust, just dampness. The whispers continued. She removed the entire grate and lowered herself in. The air was thick and musty. Her flashlight flickered but didn't die. As she crawled forward, the whispers grew louder, still muffled, still fragmented, but close. Then she saw it, a crawl-space corner where dozens of small cloth dolls were pinned into the wood. Each one had something stitched into its chest, names. Names scratched in red thread, and the newest one read Nora. Her flashlight went out, and the whispering stopped, except for one voice right next to her ear. Found you. Chapter 4. The Portrait That Watched Too Long. It hung at the end of the upstairs hallway, just past the locked room. The portrait was large, nearly floor to ceiling, its gilded frame chipped and coated in a thin layer of grime. It depicted a woman in an old-fashioned blue gown, her hands folded in her lap, her expression distant and hollow. But it was her eyes that froze Nora every time. They didn't just follow her, they waited. The first time Nora looked at the portrait, she felt a sharp twinge in her temple. The second time, her flashlight dimmed as she passed. By the third day, she was certain the woman's mouth had changed. Slightly, just enough to smile. Her mother insisted the portrait was nothing, just some old art left behind, she said. But Nora noticed her mother never walked near it, always choosing to take the long way around. One evening, the hallway light bulb popped with a soft crack as Nora stepped beneath the portrait. In the half-dark, she looked up and felt her breath catch. The painted woman's eyes were glistening with tears. The air grew cold. The floor creaked behind her. She turned, no one was there. When she looked back, the woman's head was tilted slightly. The next morning, a second portrait had appeared beside it. The same frame, the same setting, but now there were two figures. And the second one looked exactly like Nora, with her mouth open, screaming. Chapter 5. The Cradle in the Attic. It took Nora 5 days to work up the courage to explore the attic. Something about it felt worse than the rest of the house. Heavier, older. The pull-string light at the top of the narrow stairs worked, but the bulb flickered weakly, casting more shadow than light. Dust curled in the air like smoke, and the wooden boards groaned under every step she took. She found it at the far end of the attic, a small wooden cradle sitting beneath the only round window, half covered by a moth-eaten lace blanket. It rocked slightly as she approached, though the air was still. Nora hesitated before peeling the blanket back. Inside lay an old, cracked porcelain doll, its dress torn and stained with what looked like old rust. The doll's glass eyes were a faded blue, one of them cracked down the center. Its arms were positioned as if reaching. She picked it up. Beneath it, carved into the wood of the cradle, were initials: L, W, and the year, 1911. That night, Nora dreamed of crying. Not her own, not even human. It was a slow, wheezing wail that echoed down endless halls and always ended with the sound of a cradle creaking. The next day, she returned to the attic. The doll was gone. In its place, nestled in the cradle, was a thin layer of ash and the faint imprint of a hand in the dust. That night, the crying came again. Only this time, it came from right outside her bedroom door. and the floorboards creaked like something very small rocking. Chapter 6. When the lights went red. It happened the following Thursday. Nora had just returned from school, the chill of autumn clinging to her jacket, her backpack still slung over one shoulder. The air in the house changed the moment she stepped inside. It wasn't a breeze, not a sound. It was a sensation, like walking into a room that had been holding its breath. The shadows shifted subtly. They pooled in corners where light should have touched. They stretched like ink spilled in water, creeping across the wooden floors like they had intentions of their own. Cynthia had gone out to pick up groceries. Nora was alone. She set her bag down and started toward the kitchen, but stopped halfway through the hallway. Ooh, that's when the lights flickered, a soft blink, then another. Then they didn't just dim, they bled. Every bulb in the house turned red. Nora's breath caught. At first, she thought it was a sunset trick, some odd atmospheric illusion, but she checked the window. Outside, the sky was pale blue, calm, unmarred by clouds. The light was not coming from outside. It pulsed from within. She stepped into the kitchen. The fridge light glowed crimson. The microwave clock blinked a relentless red 0. Oh, clock. The hanging bulb above the dining table swayed slightly, throbbing with the slow rhythm of a heart. It wasn't just red, it was alive. Then came the sound. Not the creak of old wood, not the whisper of the fireplace. This time, it came from above. The ceiling, soft at first, like dragging feet across carpet. Then louder, heavier, deliberate steps pacing in slow circles above her head. Nora froze. There was no attic above the kitchen, no one else in the house. Her heartbeat surged as the steps paused. Then came the creaking on the stairs. She turned slowly, every inch of her skin prickling. The red light pulsed brighter now, slower and heavier, as if syncing with something breathing beneath the floorboards. She stared at the staircase. Nothing moved, no shadow, no figure, but she heard it, step by step. The third step, the fifth, then the one that was always silent. Now it groaned. Her legs refused to move at first, rooted to the floor, but instinct pulled her backward into the kitchen. She reached behind her and fumbled for the drawer. Her fingers found the handle of a long kitchen knife. The house pulsed again. The lights flickered once more, this time slower. Then out. Everything went dark. Utter dark. Even the windows, which should have let in some daylight, were black. Nora's breath was the only sound, and even that she tried to silence. Then came a voice, close, right beside her ear. A whisper, barely audible yet so clear it sent a spike of ice through her spine. Don't move. It sees best in the dark. She couldn't scream, couldn't blink. Her hand tightened around the knife handle, but she didn't move. A second passed. Then another. Just as the sound of keys turning in the front lock echoed down the hallway, the lights returned. Pale, normal, no redness, no flicker. Her mother stepped in carrying 2 bags of groceries and a hum of some old tune. "Nora, why are all the lights off?" Nora turned slowly, her face pale, her eyes wide. She didn't answer, not then, not ever, because deep in the ceiling, just above the kitchen, something had started breathing, and it hadn't stopped. Chapter 7: The Mirror Behind the Wall. It began with a draft. Nora was reaching behind a dusty shelf in her room to retrieve a fallen book when she felt it, a cold breath of air, out of place in the stillness of her space. She moved the shelf aside and noticed the wallpaper slightly peeling in one spot, revealing the outline of something hard beneath. She peeled back more of the wallpaper and uncovered what looked like an old wooden panel. Curious and unnerved, Nora fetched a screwdriver from her mother's tool drawer and pried the panel open. Behind it wasn't insulation or pipes. It was a mirror. It stretched from floor to ceiling, set into the wall as if it had always been there. The glass was dusty, yet strangely intact. Nora wiped it with her sleeve, revealing her reflection, but something was off. Her image lagged for a second before mimicking her movement. That night, she dreamt of the mirror, of standing in front of it while her reflection smiled before she did. She woke up sweating, the faint scent of old perfume lingering in the air. She avoided the mirror for days, but it began calling to her. Whispers at night, soft glimmers of movement when she wasn't looking directly at it. One evening, unable to resist, she stood in front of it again. This time, her reflection blinked, but she hadn't. Then it stepped forward. Only the glass separated them, and for a moment Nora felt it wasn't her reflection at all. It was someone else, someone who knew her name and was waiting to take her place. Chapter 8: Letters Written in Dust. It started in the library. The house's library wasn't grand. Just a cramped room with tall shelves and a single dusty armchair in the corner. Nora had avoided it until that morning. Something pulled her there, though she couldn't say why. As she stepped inside, the scent of old paper and something faintly metallic filled her nose. She sneezed and wiped her sleeve across the desk by the window. That's when she saw it. The dust on the desk wasn't just settled, it was shaped, dragged into lines. Letter, word, help me. She stared, heart hammering. The window was closed, the door had just creaked open. No one else was home. Nora ran her fingers over the dusty message, half expecting it to disappear. But as her skin touched the words, a sharp cold spread up her fingertips. She yanked her hand away. More letters began to appear, slowly, deliberately, like a finger writing from beneath the dust. "He seeks you." The armchair groaned behind her. She spun, fleshlight trembling in her grip. Nothing sat there, but the cushion was sunken, like someone had just stood up. She backed away. The door closed. From the shelves, a single book slid out and dropped to the floor. Nora picked it up, dust coughing into the air. Inside the cover was a name, Lillian Wren, dated 1912. Beneath it, in fresh black ink, "Still here." She dropped the book and ran. But on the hallway mirror, fogged from her breath, a new message had already formed. You shouldn't have read that. Chapter 9: The Door That Led Sideways. It appeared on a day when the wind howled too loudly for an autumn morning. Nora was cleaning out the narrow hallway closet near the base of the stairs when her hand brushed against an uneven seam along the back wall. She pushed, and with a dull creak, the wall gave way. A small door revealed itself. No handle, just a wooden frame smeared with dust. It hadn't been there before, she was certain. She pressed her hand against it. Cold, solid, real. With a gentle push, the door creaked open. What lay behind it wasn't a closet or another room. It was the same hallway. Almost. The wallpaper pattern was reversed. The staircase curved the opposite way. A family photo hung crooked on the wall, one Nora didn't recognize. She stepped inside. The house was eerily quiet. Shadows fell wrong, stretching in directions they shouldn't. The air was thick, like walking through water. Every sound was muffled. She heard humming, a lullaby, familiar and broken, floating from the upstairs landing. Nora followed it, heart racing. As she climbed the reversed staircase, she saw her room. The door stood ajar. Inside, someone stood by the window. It was her, but not. This version of her was pale, older. She turned slowly, eyes empty and lips curled into a twisted smile. "You weren't supposed to come here," the other Nora whispered. The light flickered. Nora backed away, but the hallway had shifted. The door she'd entered through was gone, and in its place, another door, smaller, with her name etched into it, and the humming continued. Chapter 10. The Man in the Basement. The basement had always been off limits. At least, that's what Nora's mother told her. "The stairs are rotted," she'd say. "It's not safe." But one night, as the wind screamed outside and the house trembled with a storm, Nora heard footsteps beneath her feet. Slow, deliberate thuds on the floorboards, pacing in the space below the kitchen. She grabbed her flashlight and crept to the door at the base of the hallway, the one that always stayed locked. Except tonight, it was ajar. She hesitated only a second before slipping through and descending the stairs. Each step groaned beneath her weight. The air grew colder, damper. Her flashlight flickered as she reached the bottom. The basement was a vast, shadow-choked room with stone walls and a low ceiling. Rusted shelves lined the walls, holding tools too old to name. The light caught a shape moving just ahead. A silhouette. A man. He stood with his back to her, tall and stiff. He didn't move until she whispered, "Hello?" Then he turned. His face was blurred, like smudged glass. No features, just shadow. But Nora felt his stare. Deep, familiar. He took one step forward. Nora backed away. Her light went out. In the pitch dark, she heard breathing. Slow. Wet. Then the voice. "You let me in." She ran. Up the stairs. Through the door. But when she turned back, the door had vanished. And her footprints were wet with ash. Chapter 11. Sleepwalking into the past. The first time it happened, Nora thought she had dreamed it. She woke up lying sideways in the second-floor hallway, her arms cradled around nothing, her feet dusty and cold. Her fingertips were smudged with soot and her lips were moving, but when she strained to hear, the words died. She blinked groggily, confused by the dark. When she reached her room, she found the door open, even though she remembered closing it. She went back to bed, unsettled but too tired to dwell on it. The second time, she was downstairs, standing in front of the main door with her hand already resting on the knob. The clock on the wall said 4:47 a.m. Her feet were bare again, and the wood beneath them was freezing. A deep chill clung to her skin, and her mouth was whispering something over and over. She tried to focus on the words, but they melted away the second she woke fully. When she turned around, the light above her flickered 3 times, once red, once blue, once out. The next morning, Cynthia noticed. "You're not sleeping well," she said, handing Nora a bowl of cereal.
"I'm fine,"
Nora replied, but she wasn't. Something was pulling her in the middle of the night, not just out of bed, but backward into some corner of the house that felt older than the walls. Each time she sleepwalked, she went deeper. The hallways seemed to shift, stretch, elongate like a dream you couldn't wake from. There were doors she didn't remember during the day, but always found at night. On the third night, she found herself in the attic. She didn't remember climbing the ladder or even opening the door, but she stood on the wooden floorboards, breath fogging in the chill air, facing an old cradle she didn't know was there. It rocked gently, no breeze, no touch, just motion. Dust floated in the air, swirling like something had just moved past. As her eyes adjusted, she saw her reflection in the round attic window. But it wasn't her now. It was her, younger, 8, maybe 9, pale and blank-faced, clutching the porcelain doll. The doll's cracked face was visible even in the low light, its eyes open far too wide, and it smiled. Nora took a shaky step toward the window. But it didn't reflect back. It rippled. The glass shimmered like water, and as she peered in, the surface bent and warped. The attic faded, replaced by a different version of the house. Older, untouched by modern time. Through the watery vision, she saw a girl with long black hair sitting on the attic floor, whispering to the same doll. "Here's us now," the girl whispered. Her voice was Nora's, but not. The vision shifted again. Flashes of a man boarding up the attic door, a fire licking the wallpaper in a nursery, a woman screaming without sound, holding the doll by its neck. Nora screamed, and just like that, the water glass shattered. Into light, into dust, into nothing. And she woke, gasping, sweating, clawing at her sheets, back in her bed. Her room looked normal, except the temperature had dropped. Her window was open, though she hadn't touched it. The moon hung low in the sky, watching. Nora sat up and saw something out of place. Ash, a smear of it on her pillow. She turned her head slowly toward the dresser. There it was, the porcelain doll, sitting exactly upright, smiling. She hadn't seen it in years. It had burned in the fire. She had watched it melt. And yet, here it was. Her past had walked her back to it, and it had walked back with her. Chapter 12. The Stairs That Count Themselves. It started with the counting. 12 steps. Nora had counted them 100 times. She could walk the stairs blindfolded and know exactly where her feet would land. But one night, while walking down for a glass of water, she heard a 13th creak. At first, she thought she miscounted, but it happened again the next night, and again after that. Always 13. Then 14. The steps multiplied one by one every time she descended in the dark, but in the light they were still 12. One evening she tested it. She turned off every light, closed her eyes, and began to step down slowly. 1, 2, 3. Her breath quickened as she reached the bottom. There was no floor. Just another step, and another. She opened her eyes and gasped. The staircase stretched on endlessly below her, a spiral sinking into shadow. The wallpaper peeled, the banister was cracked and damp, and somewhere far below she heard it. Whispers. Not words, but numbers. Counting. She turned to go back up, but the stairs behind her were gone. Only the ones ahead remained, lit by nothing, waiting. When she finally found her way back, hours later, she collapsed in her room, dust coating her clothes and cobwebs tangled in her hair. Her mother never believed her, but Nora noticed something new the next morning. The staircase creaked 13 times, even in the daylight. Chapter 13, The Voice in the Boiler Room. It was a room no one talked about. Even Nora's mother didn't seem to know it existed, or maybe she pretended not to. The boiler room was hidden behind a warped utility door in the corner of the basement, barely visible behind a stack of rusted shelving. Nora only found it because the house led her there. One morning she followed the sound of dripping, slow, steady, rhythmic, not from the pipes, not from the faucet. It led her downward, through the basement into that corner. When she opened the door, warm air burst through, heavy with steam and iron. Inside stood the old boiler, enormous and rusting. It breathed. She could hear it, a steady hum like a sleeping animal. She stepped inside. As the door creaked shut behind her, she noticed words scrawled across the walls. Not paint, not ink, something darker. A message repeated again and again. Burn it out. She turned slowly. The whisper came from beneath the boiler. Not from above or beside it, from beneath. Nora, it hissed, you left me down here. The floor was warm, too warm. She dropped to her knees and peered into the grate beneath the boiler. A single eye stared back. She screamed, fell backward. The eye didn't blink. She ran up the stairs. The boiler door slammed shut behind her. But from that day on, every time she passed the vent in the hallway, she heard it again. That voice, that eye. Wait. Chapter 14, What Lived in the Wallpaper. It started with the peeling. Tiny curls of faded wallpaper lifted from the corners of Nora's bedroom. She would smooth them down every morning, only to find them raised again by night. At first she blamed humidity, age, but then came the shapes. Behind the paper, faint outlines began to appear, lines that moved, grew, took shape. At dusk, when the light hit just right, Nora could see something like eyes forming in the pattern, always watching, always still, until she blinked. One evening, she peeled a strip back fully and found a handprint beneath. Small, child-sized, smudged into the plaster like it had been trying to press through. She ran her fingers over it. The wall felt warm. That night, the wallpaper pulsed. Nora sat up in bed as the patterns began to shift before her eyes. Slowly, tendrils stretched outward, curling along the ceiling, creeping toward her headboard. They made no sound. They didn't need to. She screamed. Her mother burst in. The wallpaper was still. But when they turned off the lights again, the whispering returned. From the walls, a gentle voice, breathing her name through layers of paint and paste. "Let me out." The next morning, the wall behind her bed had a new bulge, like something was pressing from inside, something that knew exactly where she slept. Chapter 15. The House That Knew Her Name. The wind didn't howl that night. It whispered. Nora stood at the foot of the staircase, heart racing, sweat cold against her neck. The doll was gone from her dresser again. Every night since it reappeared, she'd hidden it under the floorboard, behind the dresser, once even in the freezer. But each morning it found its way back to her room, perfectly placed, always smiling. But tonight was different. The house felt, the floor beneath her bare feet pulsed gently, almost like a heartbeat. The walls creaked, not from pressure or age, but from tension, the kind of groan a throat makes before speaking. She descended the stairs slowly. Her mother wasn't home. Cynthia had gone to a work shift she picked up last minute, and Nora was alone. Or should have been. As she reached the bottom step, all the lights in the house flickered, then held. Not red this time, just dim, faint, as though the house was saving energy for something. A door creaked open down the hall. The basement, the one that had always been sealed with 6 rusted nails, the one that hadn't been opened in decades. And now it stood wide. Nora didn't want to move, but her feet disobeyed. 1 step, 2. Her fingers brushed the cold, rotted edge of the basement door as she passed it. "Come home," a voice whispered from below, not spoken, not shouted, whispered like a memory, and it was her voice. She descended slowly, her hand trailing the wall. The air grew colder, thicker. It wasn't just the chill of the underground. It was something older. Something trapped. Cobwebs clung to her skin as she reached the bottom. Boxes lined the room, dust-laden, unmarked. But what drew her eye was the old trunk at the center, resting like a coffin. She lifted the lid. Inside, a child's dress burnt around the edges. A photo of a girl that looked just like her, but wasn't. A newspaper clipping. Tragedy strikes Briar Hollow. Fire claims young girl in Spine Hill home. The date? October 12, 1973. Nora stepped back. The room shuddered. She turned and saw herself, not in the mirror, in the flesh. A little girl with dark eyes, holding the doll, standing at the far end of the room. "I was you," the girl said. "You were me," Nora replied, the words tumbling out before she understood them. The house groaned again, deeper now. "You remember now," the girl said. "You were always part of this house. You died here once, and it called you home." Nora shook her head. No, I'm alive. You never laughed. Not really, not all of you. Suddenly, every bulb in the basement burst. The house seemed to breathe in. Darkness swallowed her. She opened her mouth to scream, but only ash came out. And above in the empty living room, the doll sat quietly on the couch. Smiling, it had waited long enough. And now the house had its name back. Nora,